My name is Margaret Sullivan, and at 68 years old, I thought I'd seen every shade of human cruelty. I was wrong. The woman my son married looked me straight in the eye at my late husband's memorial dinner and said, "Face it, Margaret, you're just a burden now. Maybe it's time you accepted that and got out of everyone's way." Those words cut deeper than any surgeon's blade ever could. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this burden had just inherited something worth $38 million. And I was about to teach them all a lesson about underestimating the woman who built the very fortune they were so eager to claim, before I tell you exactly how I made them all pay for that insult. I want you to know that this story gets more shocking with every twist. If you're enjoying stories about family betrayal and sweet revenge, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps our channel grow. And if you've ever dealt with toxic in-laws or ungrateful family members, share your story in the comments below. Trust me, after you hear what happened next, you'll have plenty to say. The chandeliers in my dining room cast the same warm glow they had for 42 years of marriage. But the faces around my mahogany table were cold as winter stone. It had been exactly 1 month since my beloved husband Robert passed away, and our family had gathered for what should have been a celebration of his life. Instead, it felt like my funeral. My son David sat at the head of the table, Robert's old spot, looking uncomfortable in his father's chair. At 43, he still had his father's gentle brown eyes, but lately those eyes avoided mine. Beside him sat his wife of 2 years, Jennifer Walsh Sullivan, a striking 30-year-old with auburn hair and ambitions as sharp as her perfectly sculpted cheekbones. "Mom," David began carefully, "we need to discuss your living situation." I set down my crystal wine glass, a wedding gift from 1956, and studied his face. My living situation. In my own home, Jennifer's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the table. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. And her green eyes held all the warmth of Arctic ice. "Margaret, we're concerned about you rattling around in this enormous house all alone. It's not safe for someone your age." "Someone my age," I repeated slowly. At 68, I still walked 3 miles every morning, volunteered at the local library, and managed my late husband's medical foundation. But apparently, that made me ancient in her eyes. My granddaughter Emma, David's daughter from his first marriage, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. At 17, she was home from boarding school for the weekend, and I could see the conflict in her dark eyes. She loved her grandmother, but she also didn't want to upset her father's new wife. "We've found a lovely senior community," Jennifer continued, sliding a glossy brochure across the table. "Golden Acres has excellent reviews, and they have an opening next month." I glanced at the brochure, the smiling elderly people in the photographs, looked sedated. The luxury suites looked like hospital rooms with better curtains. This wasn't about my safety. This was about getting me out of the way so they could claim my home. "And what would happen to this house?" I asked quietly. David cleared his throat. "Well, naturally, Jennifer and I would move in. It makes sense. We're family, and this place needs people who can properly maintain it. I looked around at the home Robert and I had lovingly restored, room by room, memory by memory. The antique quilts we'd bought at estate sales across New England, the hardwood floors we'd refinished ourselves, the custom built-ins that held our collection of first-edition novels. Jennifer leaned forward, her voice taking on a patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. "Margaret, I know this is hard to accept, but you have to be realistic. You can't take care of yourself anymore, let alone a house this size. The kindest thing we can do is help you transition to a place where trained professionals can look after you." Trained professionals, I tasted the words like poison. You mean nurses who will check on me twice a day and make sure I remember to eat my meals, if necessary, yes. Jennifer's mask was slipping now, revealing the steel underneath. Face it. Margaret, you're just a burden now. Maybe it's time you accepted that and got out of everyone's way. The silence that followed was deafening. David looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Emma's mouth fell open in shock. Even the antique grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to pause its steady rhythm, a burden dot after raising David alone when his father worked 80-hour weeks establishing our medical practice. After nursing Robert through his final battle with cancer, never leaving his bedside, after donating millions to medical research, supporting Emma through her education, and being the foundation that held this family together for decades, I was a burden. I stood up slowly, my spine straight despite the arthritis that stiffened my joints. Well, this has been illuminating. Thank you all for coming. I walked to my study, closed the door, and for the first time since Robert's funeral, I allowed myself to cry, but these weren't tears of grief, they were tears of rage. And as I sat in Robert's old reading chair, surrounded by his medical journals and the scent of his cologne that still lingered in the fabric, I began to plan. They wanted to treat me like a helpless old woman, perfect, that would make my revenge all the sweeter. The next morning, I called my attorney, Thomas Mitchell, and asked him to meet me urgently. Thomas had been Robert's law school roommate and our family's legal counsel for over 30 years, and he was one of the few people who knew the full extent of our family's wealth. Margaret, he said as I settled into the chair across from his desk, I was hoping you'd call. There are some matters we need to discuss regarding Robert's estate. I assumed everything would be straightforward. I said, the house, the investments, the foundation, it all comes to me, then eventually to David. Thomas adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. A gesture I'd learned meant he was about to deliver complicated news. That's mostly correct, but there's something Robert never told you about. Something he set up specifically to protect you. He pulled out a thick folder marked confidential and opened it carefully. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, bearing Robert's signature and notary seals. 2 years ago, when David announced his engagement to Jennifer, Robert became concerned. He hired a private investigator to look into her background. My stomach dropped. What did he find? Jennifer Walsh wasn't born Jennifer Walsh. Her real name is Jenny Walters, and she's been married 3 times before, each time to wealthy older men. Each time, those men died under questionable circumstances, leaving her substantial inheritances that she quickly spent. The room seemed to tilt around me. You're saying she's a... I'm saying Robert was worried enough to take precautions. He moved the bulk of your joint assets, approximately $38 million, into a trust that only you can access. It's completely hidden from public records, as far as anyone knows. Your estate is worth maybe $3 million. $38 million. I stared at the documents, my mind reeling. All those times Jennifer had made casual comments about the modest inheritance I'd received. All those calculations she'd been making about the value of the house, the art collection, the jewelry. She had no idea that the real fortune was sitting in accounts she couldn't even dream existed. There's more, Thomas continued grimly. Robert suspected that once you were out of the picture, Jennifer would find a way to eliminate David as well. He wanted to ensure that Emma would be protected. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about getting me into a nursing home. This was about a systematic plan to eliminate anyone standing between Jennifer and what she saw as her rightful inheritance. What do you recommend? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Thomas leaned forward. Let her reveal her true nature. Give her enough rope to hang herself with. And in the meantime, we'll be documenting everything. I left Thomas's office with a new sense of purpose. Jennifer thought she was playing chess with a confused old woman. She had no idea she'd just entered a game with someone who'd spent decades outmaneuvering hospital boards and medical administrators. 2 days later, Jennifer showed up at my front door with a stack of papers and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She wore a burgundy blazer that screamed expensive, and her hair was styled in a way that made her look like a corporate predator. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," she said, letting herself into my foyer without waiting for an invitation. But I thought we should follow up on our conversation from dinner. Of course, I led her to the sunroom, the one with the best view of my prized rose garden. Let her see what she thought she was taking from me. "Can I make you some coffee?" "That would be lovely." She settled onto my floral love seat like she already owned it. Spreading her papers across my coffee table, I've taken the liberty of handling some of the paperwork for Golden Acres. "All you need to do is sign here, here, and here." I glanced at the documents while preparing the coffee service, application forms, medical releases, financial authorizations, everything designed to make me look incompetent and her look like a caring daughter-in-law. "This is quite thorough," I said, handing her a delicate china cup. "You must have spent considerable time on this. Well, someone has to handle these details." She sipped her coffee with practiced elegance. "David is too emotional about the whole situation. He can't see that this is what's best for everyone." Everyone. Her smile sharpened like a blade. "You'll be so much happier at Golden Acres, Margaret. No more worrying about maintenance, no more wandering around empty rooms full of memories. And David, and I can finally start our real life together without constantly worrying about whether you've had a stroke or forgotten to lock the doors." There it was, the real Jennifer. Not the concerned daughter-in-law, but the calculating predator who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to overcome. "You know," I said carefully, "I've been thinking about what you said at dinner, about being a burden." Her eyes lit up with barely concealed triumph. "I'm so glad you're being realistic about this. It made me realize that perhaps I should prepare for the inevitable, make arrangements that would be easier for everyone when I'm gone." "What kind of arrangements?" I set down my coffee cup and looked her directly in the eyes. "I've been considering updating my will, making sure that when my time comes, there won't be any complications or family disputes." Jennifer leaned forward, slightly, trying to look sympathetic rather than greedy. "That's very thoughtful of you. Have you spoken to a lawyer about this?" "Not yet. I was hoping you might have some recommendations. Someone who specializes in estate planning for elderly clients." "Actually, I know just the person." She pulled out her phone with barely restrained excitement. "Charles Brennan. He helped my previous. He's very experienced with these situations." "Previous what?" "Previous husbands." I filed that slip away for future reference. "I'll give him a call this week," I promised. "In the meantime, perhaps I should look at these Golden Acres papers more carefully." "Take all the time you need," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise, though they did mention that the available suite might not stay open long. You know how popular these places are. After she left, I called Thomas immediately. "She wants me to use her lawyer," I told him, "someone named Charles Brennan. I'll have him investigated by tomorrow morning," Thomas promised. "And Margaret, be extremely careful. If my suspicions are correct, you're not just dealing with a gold digger. You're dealing with something much more dangerous." That night, I lay awake listening to the familiar sounds of my home. The way the old floorboards creaked, the whisper of wind through the century-old windows, the distant hum of the heating system Robert had installed to keep me warm. All the sounds Jennifer wanted to silence forever, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated the woman who'd spent 40 years learning how to survive in a male-dominated medical world where weakness meant professional death. Thomas's research on Charles Brennan confirmed my worst fears. The man wasn't just unethical, he was a partner in murder. He'd handled the estate planning for all three of Jennifer's previous husbands, and in each case, the wills had been mysteriously altered shortly before their deaths. We need to set a trap, I told Thomas during our emergency meeting. Something that will force her to reveal her true intentions. What did you have in mind? I smiled. Feeling more like myself than I had in months, we're going to give her exactly what she wants, but not in the way she expects. The plan was beautifully simple. Thomas would create a fake will, one that left everything to David but with a crucial provision. If anything happened to me within the next 3 years, the entire estate would go directly to Emma. Bypassing both David and Jennifer completely, we made sure the fake will mention specific assets that would make Jennifer's mouth water. The house, a supposed collection of rare jewelry worth $3 million. And investment accounts totaling another $4 million. Enough money to make murder seem worthwhile, but not so much that it would seem suspicious. The real hook was a clause stating that if I moved to assisted living, I would retain complete control of my assets until death, no power of attorney, no guardianship, nothing that would give Jennifer access to the money while I was still alive. She'll realize that getting you into Golden Acres won't actually accomplish her goal. Thomas observed, if she wants the money, she'll have to kill me, I finished calmly. But not until after she's convinced me to change the will to favor her directly. Thomas looked deeply uncomfortable. Margaret, this is extremely dangerous. If she's killed 3 times before, then it's time someone stopped her. I straightened my shoulders with determination. Besides, you don't survive 40 years in medicine without learning how to handle dangerous situations. The meeting with Charles Brennan was a masterpiece of performance art. I played my role perfectly, the confused elderly widow who needed guidance from younger, more capable people. Brennan was a thin, nervous man with cold eyes and sweaty palms. He spoke to me like I was a child, which made my act all the more convincing. Mrs. Sullivan, he said in a condescending tone, estate planning can be very complicated. Perhaps it would be helpful if your son and daughter-in-law joined us for this discussion. Oh, that's a wonderful idea, I said, fumbling with my reading glasses. Jennifer is so clever with these legal matters. When David and Jennifer arrived, I watched Jennifer's face carefully as Brennan explained the fake will. Her expression remained neutral, but I caught the quick flash of calculation in her eyes when he mentioned the Emma Trust provision. That's very generous, Mom, David said. But are you sure you want to tie up so much money in Emma's trust? Well, I just want to make sure she's protected, I said weakly. What if something happened to you and Jennifer? What if there was some kind of accident? Jennifer's hand found David's arm possessively. David is very healthy, Margaret. We're planning to have many wonderful years together. Of course, dear, but you never know, do you? Look at what happened to Robert. One day he was fine, the next day I let my voice trail off, dabbing at my eyes with a tissue. But I was watching Jennifer's face, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. A brief smile, quickly suppressed, at the mention of Robert's sudden decline. Had she somehow been involved in my husband's death? The thought made me feel sick, but I forced myself to stay in character. Perhaps, Brennan suggested smoothly, we could structure things differently, instead of a trust for Emma. What if the will simply left everything to David, with the understanding that he would provide for Emma's future? But what if David can't? I asked plain naively. What if he's not available? Then naturally, everything would go to Jennifer as his wife, Brennan said. She would honor David's wishes regarding Emma, I'm sure. Jennifer nodded solemnly, but I caught the predatory gleam in her eyes. Of course I would. Emma's family. The lies came so easily to her. I signed the fake will with a trembling hand, playing up my supposed confusion and frailty. But inside, I was burning with rage and fierce determination. That evening, Emma came to see me alone. My granddaughter had inherited her grandfather's sharp intelligence and her father's compassionate heart, but she'd also developed her own keen instincts about people. "Grandma," she said, using the name she'd called me since she could talk, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, sweetheart, are you really okay with moving to that senior place? Because if you're doing it just to make Dad and Jennifer happy." I looked at this young woman who meant more to me than life itself, and I made a decision. Emma deserved to know the truth, or at least part of it. "Emma, what I'm about to tell you must stay between us. Can you promise me that?" She nodded seriously. "I'm not going to Golden Acres, and I'm not as helpless as I've been pretending to be." Her eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes, when people underestimate you, it gives you tremendous power. Your stepmother has plans for this family that go far beyond just getting me out of the way." "What kind of plans?" I chose my words carefully. "The kind that would put you and your father in real danger. But I'm going to stop her. Emma, I just need you to trust me and act natural for a little while longer." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then she nodded with a maturity that broke my heart. "What do you need me to do?" "Just be yourself. Don't let on that you know anything. And Emma," I took her hands in mine, "if anything happens to me, anything at all, you call Thomas Mitchell immediately. Not your father, not the police. Thomas first. Promise me." "Grandma, you're scaring me. I'm trying to protect you. Darling, all of you." As Emma left that night, I caught her looking back at me with worry and love in her eyes. It hurt to burden her with this knowledge, but I needed someone on my side who could think clearly if things went wrong, and based on what I'd seen in Jennifer's eyes that afternoon, things were about to go very wrong indeed. For days later, Jennifer made her move. She arrived at my house unexpectedly in the early afternoon, when she knew Emma would be at school and David would be at the hospital. She looked different, harder somehow. As if she'd finally decided to drop the caring daughter-in-law facade. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the hallway. "Of course, dear. Can I get you some tea?" "Drop the act, Margaret. I know you're not as helpless as you pretend to be." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. We sat in the living room, but this time she didn't bother with pleasantries or small talk. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice cold and businesslike. "You're going to call Charles Brennan and tell him you want to change your will again. This time, you're going to leave everything directly to me. To you." "But what about David?" She laughed, and the sound was like ice cracking. "David won't be around long enough for it to matter." There it was, the confession I'd been waiting for. But I needed more evidence. "I don't understand," I said, letting confusion creep into my voice. "Of course you don't. You never understood anything important, did you? You just sat in this big house, playing the perfect doctor's wife while Robert did all the real work." She stood up and began pacing, her composure finally cracking. "Do you know how easy it was to convince him to stop taking his heart medication? A few casual comments about how the pills were making him feel weak, how maybe he should try a more natural approach. My blood turned to ice water. You killed Robert." "I helped him make the right choice," she said with a casual shrug. "Just like I helped my other husbands when they became inconvenient. Charles Brennan is very good at making deaths look natural, and I'm very good at playing the devastated widow." I stared at her. This monster who had murdered my beloved husband and was planning to kill my son, but I forced myself to remain calm and keep her talking. "And David, a tragic medical emergency. I think maybe an allergic reaction to some new medication. Or a sudden cardiac event. These things happen to doctors all the time, the stress of the job, you know." She smiled coldly. "I'll be absolutely heartbroken, of course. Too grief-stricken to think clearly about financial matters. That's where you come in. Me, you're going to leave everything to me in your will. And then you're going to have a little accident of your own. Nothing dramatic. Maybe you'll mix up your medications or have a fall in the shower. Elderly people are so prone to accidents. I stood up slowly, my hands shaking, but not from fear, from pure, righteous fury. And Emma will inherit whatever's left after the estate taxes and legal fees. Probably not much, but enough to keep her quiet until she's old enough to forget about her dead family. That was her final, fatal mistake. Threatening Emma removed any last hesitation I might have had about destroying her completely. I see, I said quietly. Well, I suppose you've thought of everything. I have, so here's what you're going to do. Right now, you're going to call Brennan and set up an appointment for tomorrow morning. You're going to tell him you want to change your will because you've realized that Jennifer is the only one who really cares about your welfare. And if I refuse, she pulled a small bottle from her designer purse, then you'll have your accident today instead of next week. This is concentrated insulin. It'll look like a diabetic coma. Very peaceful, very natural for someone your age. With health issues, I stared at the bottle, then at her face. In that moment, I saw her clearly for what she truly was, a predator who had killed multiple times and would kill again without a moment's remorse or regret. All right, I said finally. I'll make the call, but instead of reaching for my phone, I walked to my desk and pressed a button I'd had installed the previous week, a silent alarm that connected directly to the security company Robert had insisted we use after his diagnosis. What are you doing? Jennifer demanded suspiciously, calling for help. I said with perfect calm, you see, dear, everything you just said has been recorded. This room has been equipped with surveillance equipment for the past 10 days, and every word of your confession has been transmitted to both my attorney and the police. Her face went white, then flushed red with rage and panic. You manipulative old bitch. Do you think anyone will believe you? They'll believe the recordings. They'll believe the evidence my attorney has compiled about your previous marriages and the mysterious deaths that followed. And they'll definitely believe the toxicology report that's going to show exactly what you used to murder my husband. She lunged at me with the insulin bottle, but I was ready for her. Decades of physical therapy and swimming had kept me stronger. Then she realized, and a lifetime of dealing with difficult people had taught me how to defend myself. I grabbed a heavy bronze bookend from my desk and swung it at her wrist, causing her to drop the poison. You murdered Robert, I said. My voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. You murdered 3 other innocent men, and you were planning to murder David and me to get your hands on money that was never yours. The sound of police sirens filled the air, growing closer by the second. Jennifer's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal, looking desperately for an escape route. But here's what you never understood about this family, I continued with quiet satisfaction. We protect each other, we fight for each other, and we never, ever underestimate our enemies. The police burst through my front door just as Jennifer made a desperate grab for the insulin bottle, but Thomas Mitchell was right behind them, carrying a thick folder of evidence that would ensure she never hurt anyone again. As they led her away in handcuffs, she screamed threats and accusations, but I barely heard them. I was thinking about Robert, about the justice he would finally receive, about David and Emma. Who would be safe now, about the family we could rebuild without poison in our midst. The trial lasted 3 weeks and made headlines across the region. Serial killer caught by victim's mother-in-law read the most dramatic newspaper. But I didn't care about the publicity. I cared about the moment when David finally learned the truth about the woman he'd married. He came to see me the day after Jennifer's conviction, his face ages by shock and grief. We sat in my garden, surrounded by the roses Robert and I had planted together over 4 decades of marriage. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I should have listened to you. I should have seen what she really was. She was very skilled at hiding her true nature," I said gently. "That's how she managed to kill for people and nearly get away with it. But Dad, she killed. Dad and I brought her into our home. I let her, David. I took his hands in mine, the way I had when he was a small boy with scraped knees and broken toys. Your father would not want you to blame yourself for having a loving heart. He would want you to learn from this experience and move forward." With wisdom, Emma joined us in the garden, looking older than her 17 years, but relieved that the nightmare was finally over. "Grandma, how did you know? How did you figure out what she was planning?" "I didn't figure it all out at first," I admitted honestly. "But when someone shows you their true character, you should believe them. Jennifer showed me exactly who she was at that dinner when she called me a burden. Everything else just confirmed what I already suspected." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, 3 generations of Sullivans trying to heal from the trauma that had nearly destroyed us all. Finally, David spoke again. "What happens now?" "With the house, with everything," I smiled, thinking about the real will, the one that would ensure both David and Emma were provided for, with safeguards that would protect them from future predators. "Now we live," I said simply. "We remember your father with love instead of pain. We rebuild our family bonds, and we never again take for granted how precious and fragile life really is." Emma leaned over and hugged me tightly, and for the first time in months, I felt like her grandmother again instead of an obstacle to be removed. "I love you, Grandma," she whispered against my shoulder. "I love you too, sweetheart, both of you. More than you'll ever know," as the sun set over my garden, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. I reflected on the hard-won lessons of these terrible months. Money couldn't buy happiness, but it could provide security and justice. Family was everything, but sometimes you had to fight fiercely to protect it, and most importantly, age was not a weakness. It was a source of wisdom, experience, and strength that younger people often underestimated at their own peril. Jennifer had called me a burden, thinking she could push me aside and claim what belonged to my family. Instead, she'd awakened a protective force who would stop at nothing to defend the people she loved most. I wasn't a burden, I was a guardian, and I was exactly where I belonged, in my own home, with my family safe around me, and my husband's memory finally at peace. The real inheritance I was leaving David and Emma wasn't money or property. It was the knowledge that family loyalty, sharp intelligence, and unwavering determination could overcome any threat, no matter how cleverly disguised. And that lesson was worth more than $38 million. Ladies, if you've ever been underestimated because of your age, or if you've dealt with toxic people who tried to push you aside, I hope my story gives you strength and courage. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be the victim they expect you to be. If you have your own story about standing up to bullies or protecting your family from those who would harm them, please share it in the comments below. We read every single one, and we'd love to feature your story in a future video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because every week we share more stories about strong women who refuse to be pushed around or silenced. Remember, you're never too old to fight back, and you're never just a burden. You're a force to be reckoned with.